You ready?
I am ready. Well, this is
All right.
episode one, man.
Episode one. Here we go. Afternoon, fellas, and welcome to the Rock Runners Report. My name is Zeller, and we have V. Cello V.
Hey, everybody. How's it going tonight? So,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Let's get into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so, one of the things that Zel and I do quite a bit in Star Citizen is industrial-based stuff. We're in an organization that has an industrial division, and we serve a lot of time in that division kind of going through industrial, like, standard operating procedures, and just kind of theory crafting really all things industrial. I mean, that are within our purview, and sometimes that are, necessarily may fall out of our purview a little bit. And as we've discussed those things, we've kind of began to realize that maybe there's not exactly that type of format or that type of discussion that happens kind of at the level that we do it at. And so we thought maybe this would be helpful for people, as we kind of talk through. And I thought we'd start tonight maybe just talking through one of our basic Lyria Mining operations, a little bit of kind of the ideas behind some of those things, and we'll just kind of chat back and forth a little bit about that stuff, and then and see where the conversation leads. So
That's definitely one of the things, right? So you talked about going into, the theory crafting and all that, but one of the things, it's that kind of got our minds working, and things that we started thinking about is, why do we have to stick to the current meta? It's or why can we think of new ways of doing things? That's the beautiful part about this game, though, right? It's that it's so open-ended. It's there's just not one way of doing things, and that's really kind of getting into it. So changing things up, it's like, maybe there isn't just one way of doing things, and getting out there and just seeing what the game will allow us to do. What kind of things can we get away with?
that's exactly right. I think it's there's many times where there's a meta, right, or whatever, and that's a pretty kind of a buzzword, nowadays. But, basically there's a set of criteria or things that you do because you think it's the most efficient, or other people have told you it's the most efficient. And, there are occasions where, just through conversations or just through little things, those things can change, quite, and it's pretty easy, I think, for all of us. Sometimes, once you kind of get used to a set of doing things a certain way, to kind of just fall into a situation where it's like, hey, well, this is just the way it's done. But I do think that, like you mentioned, there's so many different intricate layers inside mining, in particular, but just all of the industrial gameplay, that there's not just one right way. And I think a lot of people, I do that mining stream, and it's so funny how I like the kit that I like, but people will come in and say, well, I like the Surges and I like the Stampedes, or, or somebody will say, well, I like the VAUXC3s and I like to use these pieces or those pieces. And so, just like there's layers in those particular things, there's layers in all this gameplay, and I think that you and I, have kind of began some, kind of questioning whether or not we're always doing things right, and have begun really kind of sometimes even internally testing to determine whether or not there are better ways.
I think that's one of the things, then, is that's why. That's what, is fun for us, right? Is, going out and testing these theories. It's like, wasn't too long ago, we just, had a buddy that just had a offhanded remark, and then, about, we were out doing something, and, and he sparked the thought, and then we all had this giant light bulb that went off the top of our heads and had this big aha moment, right? And
yeah, the epiphany.
it almost changed the way we started doing things.
Oh, it absolutely changed the way we started doing things. I mean, and what what Zel is speaking to is, we have prospector breaking teams, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit later as we kind of maybe, round out the more bullet pointed narrative around the whole Lyria mining operation. But specifically, what what was said was, we should use the prospectors to kind of scoop the trash up out of the way, and then just have them scoop a tiny bit of quantanium and jettison. And that was a game changer for us. I mean, quite honestly, that was a massive epiphany. In all the times that I had ran the mining operation previous to that, I hadn't really thought about using the prospectors. There is some thoughts always about, kind of like overcharging things and blowing up the trash. But actually scooping away the trash and then using the jettison mechanics to get rid of it was completely game-changing. I mean, in our prospector breaking teams, if we have 2 prospectors on board, I mean, that's 64 SCU of trash that can be pulled out of the way. It was a massive, massive change to the way that we do things. And, of course, that's, sparked some training, and then people kind of beginning to adopt that as a standard policy. It takes a little while, but it becomes it becomes one of those an interwoven piece, Yeah,
I mean, it's one thing that most definitely, that no one else is doing right now, and that was great, and that got us going with the idea of raising our efficiencies. So having our breaking and cleaning crews, or cracking and cleaning crews, is I always like to put the CNC people involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out and they do their thing. And then, which is also kind of bringing us, to what we're going to be talking about tonight. But, where we start running the efficiency. So we bring a lot of these people in, we find a cluster, we crack the cluster, and then we have the mole come and scoop it all up and then take it off. But one of the things that we're going to be speaking of tonight is how 317 kind of changed the way scanning worked a bit. Our passive scanning kind of went away.
Yeah, it's definitely the meta that we were used to with scanning changed significantly.
Yep. I mean, no longer, could we passively scan rocks. You couldn't, head in a particular direction at 300 and start picking up signals from a distance. Now you had to actively be looking for them, and that's changed a lot of things up, for better or for worse. I mean, a lot of it is a lot of these things, you definitely, when you try to adapt to a lot of these different things, and you start finding new ways of doing stuff. And I remember when that first came out, we were about to crack the pitchforks out.
Yeah, well, the natives were definitely restless. I agree with that 100%. Yep. I mean, people were, and I think that wasn't just, kind of internally in our group or whatever. It was definitely on Spectrum. It was definitely on Reddit. People were angry. I mean, a lot of people had gotten used to that wingtip to wingtip 10,000 meter swath. Yep. That you would run along the Lyria surface and of course passively pick up the rocks, and nobody at that particular time had kind of figured out the new more active meta, where you really, I mean, it really is an interesting way where you have to now you kind of use your scan angle and your scan focus, and you use ping. And you really can, at 12 up to 12.2 kilometers away, more or less see how many rocks are, in the, how many diamond icons do you get pinged back with? Because if it's more than one on Lyria, if it's 2, it's always going to be quantanium. And now not every place has that meta, but it certainly was and one of the early things, when we do a Lyria mining operation. Of course, one of the first things that you do is scouting. So this kind of does speak to that. Scouting is one of the more critical aspects of whether or not you're going to have a successful mining night. You need to have people who are, fairly competent at piloting. They're also, fairly competent when it comes to the scanning mechanics, and they would know how to kind of get into VScan, and they know necessarily to maybe wait, because there was sometimes a wait state. And that type of thing. And so you used to just kind of have everybody spread out and like you were saying, and just go as fast as they possibly could until they ran, found more than 2 rocks, and then that was always quantanium, and we'd wheel on it and check it out and see if it was worth mining.
But that was the idea, to try to cover as much ground as possible, right. Because it's that adage though, right? Time is money kind of thing. And, especially when you have a whole organization out on a particular evening and, you're having having a hard time coming up with the rocks. So, we really did have to get into, especially with people that were bird dogging for us and going out on the scouting runs, is making sure that they understood, how scanning worked currently and what you had to do and the most efficient way of getting out there. And even still, we all, kind of adapt to our particular way of doing stuff. And even to now, it's like I don't, even though, we've spoken with, with all the guys and everybody's got a good handle on it, still everybody kind of does it a little bit differently. I'm always on the move kind of guy, but a lot of guys, they'll go about 10K out and then they'll stop and then they'll, pivot around and, and see what they're what instead of, sticking to a current heading. But I guess one of the things that we were, speaking with the efficiencies, right, is how do we cover as much ground, as we possibly can, and do it quickly. We did start running little teams to see to see if how that would work, to kind of work a grid so we could find, one of the things with working our efficiencies is trying to find as many rocks in an area as possible, right? Within at least, a 30K range. So, having that, finding those clusters. But, one of the things that we've kind of noticed a little bit, and whether this is by design or just how it's been working out, is, we're not finding a lot of rocks that were close together anymore, not like we used to, and that's kind of changed up a little things. What do you think?
I don't disagree with that. I think that, one of the reasons why, it's a pretty simple, understanding of why, if you can find kind of some clusters near each other, when you have your extracting team working on, kind of coming in, and that's kind of one of the things that we do, right? Of course we scout, and then once we locate something, then we have a cleaning and cracking crew. Of course, it used to be a cracking crew, and now they have a couple rules like we talked about earlier, and then once those are cracked, we have we'll bring in a mole for extraction. Of course, the main reason is because it's got the 96 SCU. And of course 3 extraction lasers, if you happen to be fully crewed or whatever, is a real good thing. And having clusters that are near each other does allow you, potentially to do some extracting and then fly to another node that's close and already pre-cracked and ready to be kind of extracted as well. And so you're absolutely right. I think we definitely have not been as consistent at finding things near to each other. And who knows? I mean, 3.17's only been live, for the better part of 10 to 12 days or something along those lines. So I don't know that we have a huge sampling pool, but at least, I don't disagree with you. The initial findings seem to be that, things are a touch more spread out on Lyria in particular.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing, right? So, but, kind of bringing this back to where we're starting the conversation is our findings this week. So, getting out and specking out a prospector in a certain way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we did, some stealth prospector testing. The TLDR it doesn't matter, really. We definitely are starting to, like we talked about, kind of try different things, make sure that just because, things used to work a certain way, do they still work that way? Is there something new happening there? I think the next prospector I want to build is kind of like one of the most, like a durable one, that's got kind of, all, the best hit points on the devices. And then I do want to talk about some escape vectoring and things like that. Like, what is there anything, like, if you happen to be attacked, is there, what's your best chances? Do you have chance of getting, what's your best play, to get away, and that kind of stuff as well. I mean, we don't always, quite honestly, we don't always fly with Overwatch. We try to as much as we can. But there are many times when we, quite honestly, as a small mining crew, don't.
We, well, there's a lot of it, there's a lot of times, a lot of us, we're usually going on, on a lot of these little excursions, alone. We find, everybody has to find the time and things like that. And, sometimes you're just, wanting to log in for, a couple hours and just, I guess that's one of the things that we kind of love about this mining is that, it's one of those things where we can just, head out, to the Halo or head out to Lyria or, one of the other moons and, put on a little tunes and just go mining, and it's kind of like, those days of going, going fishing, but virtually.
Yeah, so. That's it. There couldn't be really a better analogy than that. I agree with that 100%. I mean, it's very therapeutic. I mean, and some people think, and rightfully so, it's a touch slow for them, for their taste. But for a lot of us, just kind of taking a prospector out as, and just kind of going just kind of mining or whatever. It's very cathartic. I mean, there's a lot of good in it. You know what I mean? In my mind, yeah. I mean, I love doing it, first of all. And then exponentially, when you get other people involved who enjoy it as much as you do, it becomes infinitely funner as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. But, I guess that's the whole thing, So sometimes we get out there and, we're by ourselves, But, that was one of the builds that I, since I think it was 3.15 was when they turned off stealth components, right? So right. A lot of the stealth components didn't work, and it's been several patches, and then when we had the idea, we were like, well, I mean, does it still work? Because there's other ships out there that actually, I know they're built with the, take the Eclipse for instance, right? So, it's built with a real small cross section, right? It's really thin and stuff like that, built to be stealthy. But it's, and we know that it is, because a lot of those, those things can't be detected. You can fire a torpedo and the guy would never even know it's coming.
You're absolutely right about that.
And so we started coming up with the idea that since like this Eclipse meta, for doing ERTs or even just PvP these days has kind of cropped up, and then we were going, well, man, maybe they kind of did a little something in the patch that we didn't know, and so we started messing around with the stealth components again because, having a stealth prospector, not being seen until you basically were tripped over, is very beneficial.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people that just exclusively mine the air and Halo specifically for that. Now, I don't feel like I've ever had enough pressure on me, knock on some wood. Not enough pressure on me where I didn't feel like Lyria was was a pretty good alternative. I don't know. I mean, it's not that I'm not saying I've never been pirated, but it's not that often, and I mean that in the most respectful sense. Now, I do think that's going to change when 3.18 goes live. I think there's going to be a lot more people that are going to, when you can actually take the cargo off people's ships, I think that's going to really kind of ramp up that end of the gameplay quite a bit. So I do expect that to change.
When the cargo refactor comes, when things become physicalized, when you can actually, I mean, I don't know if you'd actually want to try to steal raw Quantanium. And it'd be kind of funny for the first couple of guys to do it, right? Because it'd be long before they started heading down the road, and then we'd see a big explosion.
That's exactly right.
And we'd be kind of, laughing all the way back to the refinery. But yeah, when that comes up, or especially, the cargo refactor is going to be, when they get served, with the 318 and by, all the accounts, I mean, they say it's going to be by the end of the year, and everybody hopes that's going to be the case. But even still, it's in the near future, right? It's coming down the road. That's going to be a big thing, for the quote unquote piracy gameplay to kind of start getting ramped up. I mean, we've had people, kind of fly by us, got pinged out from a distance, and people is actually, rolled up, and they've kind of looked, what are you guys doing, and stuff like that. And then, notice that, we had a whole squadron behind us, and they were like, well, we'll see you guys later,
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a big difference when we do like an organizational mining operation versus kind of the little things that we tuck into small groups. We definitely always run with security in some settings.
But, being out there by yourself, I mean, but that's one of the things, and I'll tell you this, one of the reasons I started speccing out my prospector to be more beefy was because, I would get out there and was, before we, you'd have rocks laying on top of each other, and we started breaking up the pieces, and every once in a while you could have some of those errant rocks that kind of hit you under the chassis there and kind of do some damage. So one of the things that I started doing was getting out there and finding the beefiest shields I could get with the most hit points. And when we're breaking rocks, I run my capacitors all the way to full shields all the time, all day, all long. And that was one of the reasons I started beefing up my prospector, is for those, for that reason. And the beauty about keeping a quantum drive on board, we were using it more or less for efficiency, is how fast can we get back to the refinery.
Right.
But it's also one of those things is when you have a quantum drive that has a fast recharge on it, because lately, I mean, it happened every once in a blue moon, but here lately it's become more prevalent of, especially with the NPCs when Quantum went live. A lot of these NPCs mantises were running around, and they're just pulling you out of Quantum. And the way the VK00, it spools up so fast.
1.75, yeah, it's insane.
I have enough time to actually target, see if it is an NPC or a player character before I boogie on out of there. It spools up just that fast. And keeping, really, we kind of want to take that jackrabbit approach, right? It's like the faster we can get out of there, the safer we'll probably be.
I don't disagree with that. I think you should, if you're pivoting in a prospector to fight, you're doing it wrong. I mean, for the most part. I mean, unless you've really got a sense that you've got like an incredibly unique situation.
Yeah, well, shoot, man, I've with the way sometimes things don't spawn back on your ship for months. I ran the prospector without guns, so I didn't have guns to begin with. Not that I would ever try to turn and fight. It's
well, and I mean the stealth prospector we recently kitted out, I took the guns off of it. And and we of course did a lot of shutting a lot of the individual components down, seeing if that would make any difference. It just didn't.
Much to my disappointment, to be honest.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
we it's not that we didn't know these things, but sometimes things pop up and they don't tell you what's in the patch notes, because we had a lot of things that weren't in the patch notes that happen to be changed. Heck, just a simple example is they didn't tell us that they were doing slight little changes to the prospector. We got it back at 317, and we were all surprised of how the lighting changed on the inside, how it was a bit more clean and shinier. It was
the UI was super crisp. Oh,
yep,
it was so muddy before, and it's just it's way better.
Yep. The UI was changed. Yeah. You could actually get into your mining seat. You didn't have to play the oh, maybe it's over here game.
Yeah, or being of course they had that bug famously where you were kind of trapped in the seat where you couldn't get out of it, and eventually you had to learn how to lay down and clip out of the bottom of it. But and that's the funny thing. I mean, that Star Citizen does have we'll sit around and talk about it mostly, never really mentioning all the little things that you have to do to kind of keep it upright, because we all know them or whatever. But there are certainly some things. So, when they do stuff like kind of circling back to what you said about how like they improve the UI or how those things get modified or changed, it is a big deal. I mean, it affects, especially for people that spend a lot of time in those ships. I mean, it's a helpful thing to not have such a muddy UI. It's a helpful thing to be able to have a clearer picture of what's going on, and when you're maybe mining volatile
materials.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I mean, the UI, man, that was really a big thing, wasn't it? I mean, it's like, how many times were you had to spin around the rock, looking for the shadow because, you didn't have enough contrast to see where your charge window is, so. I mean, that's a big deal, I mean, I still feel, I mean, it looks great, but I still feel like it could be refined a little bit more for my taste anyway, so.
Well, I think so too, and everything's. That's the one thing I do think about Star Citizen in general. Everything's a work in progress. None of this stuff is gonna be exactly how it. I mean, some of it may be more or less around the same structure, but a lot of it is going to change. I mean, and there's going to be tons and tons of things that are going to change with a lot of the major functions coming online. Of course, all of the big ones, entity streaming and the persistence being what it is, and those types of things are really, and we talked about the cargo refactor, physicalizing everything. There's really going to be some fundamental systems that are going to be completely redone. And so what we have now isn't necessarily what we're going to have tomorrow. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think kind of doing, conversations like this, as well as just kind of the in-game kind of theory crafting, and it's an important thing, right? It's an important thing because things do change. Sometimes there's unwritten changes. Sometimes there's soft stats on things that aren't necessarily published. If you give those things a try, there are times when you can really, like something that you'll hear us probably talk about a lot, which is improve your efficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really, if we're gonna, stick to the report as we do the report every week, is it's like with everything in flux the way it is, it's the little changes that are becoming, and the beautiful thing about it is right now is that with a lot of these tools that they already, these last little bit of tools that they have, these last little pillars of tech that they have to work out, we've seen big changes just in the past couple months, right? I mean, we've seen big things coming, and I believe they're just going to start ramping it up, and it's going to start coming quicker and quicker.
You know, a lot of shade gets thrown at Star Citizen, and you know, some of it's rightly deserved. But I will say, I mean, starting the game a year and a half ago when there weren't refineries, there wasn't a whole bunch of ships that are in the game now. You know, there wasn't a whole other, you know, quite a bit of different game. There was no, you know, inventory system like it is now. There's, you know, certainly no looting, certainly no medical gameplay. I know that it, you know, and I definitely hear everybody's talking points. You know, it's been a long time. It's been this. It's really a fairly, once you play Star Citizen enough, you do realize it's a fairly audacious game. I mean, it's a very kind of, it's a very aggressive thing that they're trying to pull off. You know, it's not in the lane. It's in its own lane. You know, they're making the lane as they go.
Well, that's the thing. It's a, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's a large scope type thing. You know, I mean,
it is a large scope.
It gets down to the minutia, right? It gets down to the nitty little gritty, you know, to the smallest little details. I mean, these people are ultra detail oriented, right? So, you know, this is, you know, Chris Roberts, if anybody has, you know, followed this guy, you know, space games is his life, right? Or his, you know, he created his first one at 18, right? Became a millionaire at 18.
Pretty amazing.
By creating it. And this, it's kind of like one of those things. I'll talk to people all the time, and I was like, if someone gave you a gigantic blank check, you know, and said, I'm going to build the ultimate game, what would you do? You know, and it's kind of like one of those things. He's thrown everything into this game and the kitchen sink, literally. And I think it's great. You know,
I think too. You know, like I never ceased to be stunned by it. You know, I'm never. It always does blow. And yes, there's, you know, there are some times when, you know, I mean, you know, when things aren't functioning right or whatever. But when things are functioning right, you know, and there you will have an experience kind of like something like nothing else, like no other game I've ever played, and I've been playing computer games since the 80s, the early 80s. I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you and I were growing up,
right?
We never thought that we'd see something like this with this fidelity and everything else. But
That's exactly right. It's the fidelities.
It blows your mind. I mean, how many times?
The scope is insane on this game.
It is. How many times have you been out mining or out in a ship and you started, you know, cresting horizon, man, and the sun started coming up in a certain way, and the light bouncing off the rocks and off the ice and stuff like that on Lyria, and you're just looking and go, holy crap, man! I mean,
yeah, they don't even
look at that. You're just like taking screenshots.
Well,
you're like,
exactly right. I mean, they don't even have the cloud tech in, and there's occasions where the clouds look so amazing on that. You know, and the first time I ever kind of landed on Crusader, I was in a 135C. I landed on Daymar in a 135C, and I went into a cave, and, you know, I did a little hand mining, and it was back before. The only thing that was persistent in the game at that time were backpacks. You know? Right. And I came out of that cave, you know, and I always think about this one moment, and when I was looking over the top side of the 135C, Crusader was in the background over, you know, hanging, you know, in the sky, and the scale of the game just kind of floored me at that moment. You know, it's like this game is not, there's nobody being this ambitious. I think that's the word I was looking for, is ambitious, right?
Ambitious, yeah.
You know, and the one thing I will say is, you know, a lot of people complain about the business model. Well, the business model is what's allowing them to be this ambitious. I mean, if they had a publisher, if they had rules, if they didn't make their own lane, something would have been forced out 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and it wouldn't be nearly. I would rather have the possibility of what will be than have had something a couple of years ago that wasn't good enough.
Well, you know, this has come up recently, right? With, you know, you're always going to have the negative Nancys out there, right? So,
absolutely.
And, you know, people are talking about, oh, well, they dropped, you know, 3.17.1 and, you know, it's full of bugs and all this other stuff. And, you know, it was just to get the ship sale out there. Well, Okay, maybe so, right? But that's, especially when you have, there's, was it 2 times a year, right? There's a big, it's a big deal. It's a big sales moment for
Right.
those guys. I mean, that's where they make their money for the year. It's like with the amount of people. I mean, you see it with a lot of stuff, and not to get off the road, but you see with a lot of games where people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm paying for this, or oh my God, this isn't a free to play model or whatever. It's like, I mean, how do you think these people make a living, right? I mean, how do you think that they pay their developers? I mean, do you think that everything is served up to you to be this, some form of altruism? Is like, oh, here's a game for you to play, Johnny, just you alone. It's like, I mean, these things have to be paid for. I mean, I do not begrudge these guys that, I mean, they have to make a living, right? And it's not a cash grab. Not when you have to pay 600 employees.
Well, and a lot of them programmers, and programmers.
That's right, and
that's a very
we've all been around the tech field, man. I mean, it's a thing where you got to pay for your talent, right?
And not just in some cases programmers, also leaders in their field too. I mean, people that are.
That's the thing. You want the best. Who
else is
right?
doing this? Yeah, exactly. I mean, who else is trying to build this tech? I mean, I don't necessarily know that anybody is exactly, kind of.
No one is building this tech. As a matter of fact, they were talking about, with all this stuff is they've built this. This is from scratch.
Right.
All this stuff, is from scratch, and the tech that they have involved, man. It's like, really, if they wanted to, and I thought I heard murmurings or some of this stuff is, especially when it comes to with all the server tech that they're doing, especially with a lot of this where they've kind of developed out of the CryEngine and started doing their own thing,
right?
Is some of this tech never existed, and they could actually sell some of this tech to other companies, especially with the amount. We don't even know how deep the AI goes. I've kind of joked over the years. I remember back, back in like 2012, 2013, 2014. I get 2013, 2014 is when that started getting ramped up pretty hard, and then 2015 they really started in on, how deep they're going to go with the AI and how this AI is going to behave. And we've seen a little bit of it here recently with quantum coming into the game. You've got 100,000 AI in the background doing their own thing, and with the stuff that they have planned, with programming these NPCs to think, it's like, well, I got a job to do. I got to get up and go to my job at this particular time and do these actions and then leave, and then the new ones come in and all this other stuff. And with the way they describe it, I know that sounded very simplistic, but the way they describe it, and if you've been into programming, a little bit about what they're talking about, that kind of blows the mind. The way I kind of explain to it is, man, when this comes, when this is fully realized, it's going to get to one of those things where that shit's going to be like Skynet. You're never going to turn that on. And the next thing you know, it's going to become self-aware, right?
That whole situation about how you simulate load, and kind of is one thing, right? I mean, when you do this kind of in programming, I mean, you might have 1,000 concurrent users or 1,500 concurrent users, or if you're blessed and have a great piece of software, maybe 100,000 concurrent users. Who knows? But you definitely need to be able to, you need to be able to test to scale. I mean, what they're talking about is a completely much more immersive version of that. I mean, where behind the scenes there's a whole bunch of these quote unquote bots or routines that are running. but they're also going to be physicalizing a portion of them as well, like in the universe. So, yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating concept if you think about quanta just in general. How it's every single moment, a certain number of there's some automation happening in the back end that basically simulates as if people were going to these places, picking certain things up and running at certain places. And of course, then on top of that, the entire layers of all the tools that are necessary just to inform people that, hey, this place has helium for a lot cheaper than the rest of the places, that type of stuff.
And that's the thing, crazy. Right? Is, these are a lot of things that a lot of people take for granted. They don't realize, I guess you and I do a little bit because we know a little bit about, tech, especially with server tech and things like that. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize, the amount of work that's gone into this, man, and especially the stuff in the back end is, I mean, the code that these people have had to write, the problem solving that these people have had to do, it's like, if you and I were tasked to say, hey, we need to have persistence, we need to be able to take a whole block of servers, running down this whole line and make sure that when they come together, that they come in at a seamless moment and keep everything persistent at the same time. Well, so nothing gets lost in between.
You go back 5 to 7 years and think about what games did you fly into the atmosphere on and land on the planet's surface?
No, where it's yeah.
Who did that?
You could, but it would be you would go into an instant situation.
Well, right? It's like a cinematic rail. You know what I mean? In a lot of cases, or like you said, it was not a shared. It wasn't shared space. It was something that was kind of specifically spun up on a server with a small group of people allowed into it.
When you can be, say, about 20K up in the atmosphere and shoot down at the planet about where people are, because you'd see the little, you can see people's little lights and stuff, up from that distance. You still have line of sight from there. And if you could shoot a laser bolt down to the ground and the person there could actually see it hit the ground.
Right.
I don't know what else to tell you, man. That's impressive as hell.
Well, it's unbelievable. I mean, and so I think there are lots of reasons why people come up with that, hey, Star Citizen it's this or that. And I think a lot of people buy into kind of the narrative about how long it's taking and I don't judge anybody on any of that stuff. The one thing I will say is there's just nobody who's taking the risks like they are. I mean, and because of that, here I am. I play, and I have mined in Star Citizen now for about a year and a half. Almost, probably if I were to put it on a pie chart, 90% of my time has been, mining. More than likely. And I enjoy the heck out of it. Love it.
Well, that's the thing, right?
I'd log on right now and mine if we were doing this. You know what I mean? I love
if we were doing this right now, we'd be mining.
Right, so. Exactly, So,
but that's the thing, right? I mean, we're the nuts and bolts type dudes, right? We're into that industrial, industrial gameplay.
Right.
But to kind of, what we were saying before, I bet you didn't know this little statistic. Since 3.17 launched, there has been 2,000 people a day sign up for Star Citizen.
I didn't know that. That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, so people are starting to get into it. And that's one of the things is that, things are going to, to kind of bring us back, things are going to start accelerating pretty fast.
And it's a good time to get into the game because now you do have where you can shoot things and loot things. There is more of the kind of the standard FPS features. It's a sandbox. It's a survival game. It's it's FPS. space combat, and then you have all the industrial layers. I mean, it really is a fascinating project, and it's certainly caught our attention. I know, probably, in really a way no other game or project really has in a long time for me.
No, I mean, absolutely not. And to kind of a little bit about, it's like, what do you feel about, a lot of this stuff, we're kind of 10 years in the making, but I think, to be really honest, it's taken this long for them to build the tech. But, because it's all problem solving stuff. I mean, you can't put a timeline on innovation.
George Lucas did not shoot the Clone Wars first because he didn't feel like he could make that movie.
That's the thing, right? I mean, yeah, it just didn't have the tech available at the time, right? But
I mean, and that really has been a big part of it, right? I mean, is getting the tech online for sure.
But I feel like they're at a place now that the game is really starting to be made. I mean, I guess in this last year, it's really when the game is actually being made, right? So,
right.
We'll be, I guess, knock on wood, and Lord willing, and all that. It's like sometime next year, we'll be in beta. So,
right.
And that's when things will really start to get ramped up. But having mining and things like that as being kind of the first true gameplay loop, do you feel like that we're going to be kind of sitting on a lot of the stuff that we already know while they kind of work on it? Or do you feel it's one of those things that it may be kind of like kind of a little soft spot for the, for a lot of this, because, hey, we saw mining gadgets pop up out of, it's like, they're like, hey, we're going to get mining gadgets and stuff. And you're like, okay. And, so do you feel like that we're going to get a lot of, and then the Expanse kind of pops up out of the blue, they're like, ooh, hey, we're going to have, a mobile refinery. And you're like, ooh, cool.
I definitely think they have a couple pokers in the fire there, right? The one thing for sure, obviously, with the Starfarer refueling, which is something we haven't touched on yet, and today, I mean, and what an awesome layer that is, and of course the Expanse. I do think that there's this quote unquote the road to Pyro or whatever. I do think that they are starting to build these components in, these pieces in, that you would want to be familiar with before Pyro became a thing. May have some experience with them or whatever. I also do think, if I was building a game, putting in the mining loop first is one of the I mean, if you think about the fundamental building blocks for everything, is going to be the things that you can get, extract, the alloys, all the metals, all the different types of materials that you would need. I think that, and I honestly do not know what their plan is for crafting or for base building. I mean, my hope is someday, like, I think I mentioned it last night when we were in there in Halo, is, hey guys, in order to build this, landing pad, we're going to need, 375 SEU of Baxilite and,
aluminum,
1200 corundum and, or whatever. And you have to kind of bring these materials to whatever base building ship, and it just kind of converts those into the things. I really hope that there's, and I think you and I, we'll probably have a soft spot for this, and I'm sure maybe someday we'll have our whole episode about this, but I do hope that they adopt some kind of a Star Wars Galaxies type approach. Whether or not the individual things need individual, like whether or not the alloys need, like, specific qualities, that they, have like stats on them individually, is here nor there. But I do hope that there's some kind of, a reason to need diamond, a reason to need, laranite, a reason to need these things, you know what I mean? Even if it's just, hey, we're not, Crusader, Industries is not building any more M2s right now because they don't have enough diamond.
See, that type of gameplay would be fantastic, right? And I'm that, I'm pretty sure that's the direction that we all want to go, especially with the way once more of quantum kind of gets wrapped
right,
up.
Exactly.
these companies are going to need these raw materials, right? I mean, they've that's the cool thing about CIG, you know, and you know, it's kind of, to be honest, I'm guilty of it too, right? I look at, you know, I'm a big picture type of guy, right? You know, and
Right,
you know,
absolutely.
I like to, you know, I like to see the big things first and stuff, and but with a lot of that, where you know, a lot of these big games, I'll give you for instance, and you know, not to, you know, get going off on another tangent, but you know, I pulled up you know, the reclaimer last night and was rolling through, and was, you know, the massiveness of this ship will just blow your mind. And you know, it's like that ship was developed and put out before there was even a gameplay loop for it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's this gigantic ship, and if you bought it with in-game cash, it's 15 mil, right? And that was a lot of me saving up, you know, you know, that was a lot of mining, put it that way.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And for something that, you know, obviously salvage is coming, and that was kind of, you know, the reason. And you know, we do, you know, we do run industry, so you know, that is part of, you know, part of our purview.
Right.
So, you know, but you know, just looking at how the scale of this thing was just unreal, and you know, they don't even have that gameplay loop in yet. So to kind of bring it back is that, you know, all these, you know, they've got so many different materials out there, right? I mean, we can mine a bunch of different materials right now.
Right. Oh yeah,
That
absolutely.
but the only thing that is, you know, at this particular time, the only thing that's worth mining is quantanium. So when they get these other things in, you know, it's like I said, I believe they, you know, they have you know, they have the big idea, and it's like, well, you know, to facilitate the big idea, we're going to add all these things out there. Now, when we get down to the gameplay, we're going to, you know, like you were saying, Crusader needs, you know, needs about 200,000 tons of aluminum. You
Right,
know, and,
exactly.
and who can deliver it at, you know, whatever, and get out there and mine that stuff, you know. So, and then, you know, when base building gets on, you know, it's like all the stuff that, you know, it's like how many times it's like, oh man, all this inert, you know, it's like, but you know, there's going to be a time that, you know, hell, just to build walls, I mean, we're going to have, you know, thousands and thousands of tons of inert material or whatever, you know.
Well, that's what you, I mean, really, I mean, that's what you hope for, right? Is it does take, you know, even ships. I mean, you know, you hope that, like, for instance, like if you have something like a Liberator, or you have something like a Kraken, or you have something like, you know, that's a repair type, you know, it would be awesome if you could deliver like just the raw materials, and it could convert that stuff into the materials it may need in order to conduct those repairs. You know what I mean?
And, yeah, I mean, that would be the way to go, right? Is that, you know, I don't know. And like I said, and this is definitely another show, you know, the whole, you know, I don't want to get, you know,
yeah, and
belabor the salvage thing, but you know, the whole thing of having having raw materials on board for repair. You know, I don't know if I'm totally sold on this whole dissolving the outside layer of a ship thing, right? I thought it was going to be more of a chunky, you know, let's start ripping pieces off. Like
Yes.
if you look inside the reclaimer, it has this big cruncher in there where it's designed to actually break down those metal materials, right? You put, you know, it has a big claw and everything, and basically you just rip these pieces off, and it sticks it in that hopper, and it just, you know, crunches all that material up, right? And starts breaking it down, and then, you know, you can start using the technology to break it down into its basic parts, right?
Right.
So,
I mean, yeah, atomizing it with a laser was not necessarily exactly. I mean, there's certainly there could be some aspect of that, but to me, I mean, and obviously salvage, like I probably have a little more of an old school thought of salvage, but there's a lot more crunching and ripping and tearing and, and kind of recycling and, and turning a lot of that stuff, quite honestly, most of it into scrap, but,
Right.
but a lot of it, of course, if there are components or, if there is some kind of a way to separate out some of the more, I mean, I would imagine a derelict would have an enormous amount of like equipment that you could just tear through and, spare parts, reuse things, that type of thing. And of course, the elements are, space is, is incredibly challenging, and and probably a lot of that stuff in not the right environments or whatever would be, I would imagine. Space is probably very hard on things if life support systems are offline and that type of thing. So, that's, and who knows at what level they're diving into that. But I agree with you. I mean, specifically with salvage or whatever, as much as I have just adore mining, I definitely wasn't as sold with the vulture kind of shooting the lasers out. You know what I mean? And that type of thing. I do hope that maybe, this first iteration is just what it is, and that there's a little more, what you and I are kind of, I think, on the same page about, a little more actual kind of tearing, like taking a wing off of a thing and kind of chewing it up. You know what I mean? Or that type of thing.
Oh, that's the thing, right? I mean, you would hope it would be more visceral like that, right? More
Absolutely.
where, you'd. Well, I mean, it's already designed that way, right? Like I said, the reclaimer is, already has that big old honking claw off the front of it, man. And what it does is it just goes in there and tears things off. And even with consider this, right? Even with the multi-tool, they have that acetylene torch attachment, and it's specifically designed to cut pieces off. So,
Exactly.
I mean, I feel like, it'd be, especially with the multi-tools, it's like you go in, you cut pieces off, and you take the grab tool and you kind of, the tractor beam tool, and you kind of shoot it off over there, and it goes in the hopper and gets all crunched up, right? I mean, those are the things that we want. We want those bone cracking, crunchy sounds, that where they're breaking these materials up in a little bitty bits.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And I mean, that coupled with, being able to maybe to enter the derelicts and strip, like finding salvageable components, right? That's, here's, oh, wow, I just found an XL1 drive in this thing. Here's a quantum drive. Here's a couple of shield. I mean, originally there was this concept, in my mind, which I thought was fantastic. And I heard somebody else say this one time. But they were like, it's going to be awesome when you can, like, salvage a component, and, obviously with the vulture, the reclaimer, then you could take that component over to, like, the crucible and repair that component. And then you can actually take that repaired component to, like, the Endeavor and overtune or whatever it is, overclock or, kind of enhance that component so it actually works better. Like, and then you can actually then run that over to your BMM and sell the component, So you literally could have this whole gameplay loop, this entire salvage. It's a lot. If you think about it, it's not terribly different, than you when you go mining. You mine something and then you maybe take it to the refinery and then it gets refined and you haul it off to a place. So a different kind of version of that. You know what I mean? Where you would have that. So I do know. And one of the things, we won't mention other people's, material too much, but Salty Mike does mention a few times, it's not unlike us in a way where it's like, hull stripping's not salvage, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I'm as, I mean, hull stripping's not salvage. It really isn't. I mean, there's some truth to that. And I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily if you're able to atomize something and just kind of maybe unatomize it, like kind of put a patch on like a ship or something, but we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. I mean, salvage is going to be such an important, fun part of the gameplay loop. And and who knows, I mean, especially, you hate to say this, but there could be situations where, after a fight, You know, like if a couple of fleets kind of meet, you know, in some system, kind of a long ways away from other places, you know, being able to, you know, kind of salvage their wreckages if you happen to win that battle.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're already, you know, one of the big things is that they've really been showing off, man, is, you know, the little Argo tugboat thing.
Oh, that SRV, I love
the
that
SRV,
thing.
yeah.
Oh,
And
man, I love that thing for sure. And all of those Argo, I mean, first of all, I'm an Argo fanboy. And I know that you and I are going to come back to and probably do all sorts of episodes about ships in particular. I mean, you know, the Prospector's my favorite ship, but I love the Argo Mole. I love the Raft. I love the Hull series. I love I love all the SRV and the different Argo, you know, kind of runabouts, you know. So there's, of course, the Mule. There's a lot of ships, you know, the ROC, the ROCDS, that we're going to be able to kind of, you know, spend some time on and chat about, you know, just at length. And, you know,
well, that's our thing, you know. We like those big, chunky industrial things.
We do.
So.
And we've been having a ton of fun with the Starfare recently. I think that's, you know, that gameplay loop is actually, quite honestly, I think, you know, I'm not sure it's getting as much love as it should get. I mean,
I'll tell you what, you know, next week we should devote a whole episode to this. I mean, because it really deserves a whole episode.
It really does. I mean, it is an incredible experience to refuel people. It is an incredible experience to kind of understand the gameplay and how that works. It's super fun to witness. It's super fun to be a part of. And it's, you know, it's going to be an incredibly critical piece of moving forward with, you know, quote unquote, the road to Pyro too. You know,
well, absolutely. I mean, it, you know, these systems, I mean, right now we're kind of spoiled a little bit because Stanton isn't that big, right? I mean, as a scale, it isn't that big. I mean, for other games, it's big. Right. I mean, it's hard to really kind of quantify, but you know, in the future, Star Citizen systems are going to be, you know, because this one got scaled down to kind of try to cram everything in there to kind of get the gameplay going. But, you know, they're going to be scaled up. You know, I think, you know, it's like 1/10 what Pyro is going to be. And, you know, we think it's a long trip now from, you know, from ArcCorp to Microtech. You know, that's going to be, you know, like a drive down to the grocery store compared to how Pyro is going to roll.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, Pyro, they really are talking about some very limited resources there. Of course, you know, Ruin Station, I know. There is some talk about some outposts as well. I mean, I think that they're probably going to have some places besides the one, but just, you know, traveling from one system, one moon to another, or like Pyro 1 to Pyro 2 or Pyro 2 to Pyro 3, you know, traveling to the distances are like night and day. I mean, it's like a way bigger system.
And that's another thing too, is that, you know, for an organization, you know, for organizations out there, especially for the small to medium sized ones, where, you know, you're going to constantly have to stay on the move because, you know, it's another thing too that people don't realize. Pyro is going to be broken up into faction. It's like, am I traveling? You know, it's like, am I getting close enough to this area? You know, it's like, who controls this area?
Right.
And are they going to shoot me on sight?
That's exactly right. That's an excellent question.
You know, so it's not like I can stop and get gas anywhere. You know, it's like
and I know
we're going to have to have our own little
outpost.
You know, our own little, you know, mobile org. You know, where we're just kind of rolling by. You know, and you know.
And that really, I mean,
the system, you know. So
yeah, I really wonder how they're going to handle. I mean, that's going to be a very interesting thing, right? Because let's say you have you have like a Carrick or that type of thing nowadays, right? Or you know, it's kind of your command and control center. I mean, but eventually you'd have something like a Polaris, or even, you know, let's play it out even a little further, like a Kraken, right? Of course, then you can kind of, I think you can kind of maybe store ships on that. I mean, who knows? I don't even know.
It has it has a small landing bay. So
Right.
I think you can get like four fighters in it, I believe.
So it makes you wonder, I mean, can you pull ships from that? I mean, and if you do go to pull ships from that type of thing, is it like there has to be a bed that you log out in, you know what I mean? And it's like that's taken you're so like if you go to like the person who owns the Kraken goes to log off, how do that type of thing? Yeah, it's all that stuff is going to be incredibly interesting to see how they figure out all that stuff going forward. That part to me, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into that part of things for sure.
Well, I know this is in the future, right? But at some point, especially with I hate to call them capital ships, because they're more, like, the Kraken's going to be a little bit bigger, but then you have things like the Polaris and the Perseus and things like that are more Corvettes, right?
Right.
So, I mean,
absolutely,
they're huge ass ships,
right.
But, they're not capital ships.
Right.
And, having these, especially these medium-sized orgs and stuff, where you got, 30, 40 guys. And, they're, running these ships, by the time we get to Pyro, we'll have persistence. So at what point does it come in where, you have the NPC crews that are kind of taking care of the day-to-day ship thing where you can log out, the ship, stays where it is, and somehow, we keep it defended or how does that work where, where the guys are logged out, the ship is kind of hanging out in space because there is persistence. Is it one of those things where, if nobody's on board, then it isn't attackable or,
what on earth? I mean, here's the thing, like, right? Let's say there's 25 of you, your orgs together, and you have your refueling ship, and you have your repair and your rearm, and you have, maybe an expanse or two out there, and you're doing your thing, and everybody just, you kind of, however it works, if people bedlog or whatever, I don't know exactly. I mean, but obviously, like, let's say you log back on, like later on, you're just, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go hang out. Like, oh, that's right, I'm in the middle of space, and I don't have the fuel to get anywhere, So,
I mean, think of it this way:
it's going to be very interesting,
Pyro is one thing, and it's definitely going to be, it's definitely going to increase the scope dramatically. But think of it, it's like, well, however long it takes you to make the jump back to Stanton, but think of it this way, in the future, when you're 10 jumps out, 20 jumps out from somewhere, and you just, you can't, you're away from civilization. I mean, literally in real time,
right.
It would take you hours to get back to where,
right.
to where you would, be quote unquote, safe.
Right.
Kind of thing. That's going to be some, that's going to be some things that need to be addressed, right? It's like, how's that going to work, so.
And one thing I will tell you is I don't even know how that works in like a game like Eve, you know what I mean? So there may be some places that have some thoughts or, at least some kind of meta to borrow out of for things like that. And, maybe when we put this out, some people will comment on this part of it, you know what I mean? Because it is interesting, what about that whole thing is just fascinating to me.
No, it's going to be, it's going to be fantastic, really, isn't it? It's like one of those deals where, what if, in the future, right? So we choose a, particular solar system as our little home base,
Right.
And, whether it was Stanton or, whatever, there's going to be a lot of different ones. But there is like a really rare material, and it's out in the bejesus belt,
right,
system. It just out there, and it takes like hours to get out there, where so we got to bring our own little kind of like our own little mobile setup. We got to bring the Starfarer, so we'll have fuel. We got to we're not going to jump 10 prospectors out there, right? So we're going to have to load them up in something.
Right, yeah.
And, then when we get out there, it's like, what if it's an unstable material like quantum or whatever, or quantanium? And, we have to refine it. So we bring the expanse with us and we have to refine that material. And then we have to have a place to store it. And, it's like, well, it took us, 2 or 3 hours to get out here, are we going to, it's 11 o'clock at night and we all got to get up and go to work, or we're going to, fly back till 4 in the morning, and then, cause we're going to have to log out there or whatever. Right. So,
and that's exactly right. It is that kind of a situation, where, obviously, what we're articulating, just having Stanton is one situation, but like you said, you get 5 or 6 or 7 systems away from where it's quote unquote safe, and I mean you're going to have a lot of. There's going to definitely be need to be some kind of a, like, almost like when you get to the splash screen, there's an org hanger and you can pull like a particular org ship to kind of fly off of or something, I mean something along those lines, where certain ships inside in an area or whatever are spawnable. It's gonna, however, I don't necessarily have a good grasp on how that's going to happen, but I do think that is going to be a fundamental kind of an interesting thing. I don't necessarily know that you're going to be able to plan everything that you would need to plan just for an evening. I mean, it seems like you might be taking or at least I hope it's like, yeah, this is going to take a couple of weeks. We're going to start here. We're going to go to this system and grab this stuff, then we're going to go to this system and we're going to do this stuff here, and then we're going to go to this system, and we're going to grab this stuff, and then when we come back, we'll have the things that we need collected, because we have to go to these 3 systems because the things are required in order for us to do the thing that we want to do. Like we're building this, adding on something to, to a base, or, we've been contracted to manufacture something or whatever, and in order to do that, we have to collect these materials. You never know. I mean, whatever it is, it's going to be fascinating.
I tell you what, man, it is. It's going to be wild. It really, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this kind of plays out. I think it's, it's wow. I mean, with the direction, theoretically, you could play. It's like, with the scope of this game. I mean, if these guys, think if you had, if you were a game and it's already been 10 years in the making and everybody's still excited about it,
Right.
And, think if this thing has some legs, a little longevity. Theoretically, you could play this game forever, because, I mean, you just keep adding, and it's limitless, right?
If it doesn't fold, and I mean, if it's a situation where they continue into the future, and like you said, they keep adding and adding and adding different gameplay loops on. I really could see myself playing this game for the next 20 years. I mean, I honestly hope that's the case.
Well, I tell you, man, I'm definitely one of those cats that sticks with a game. That's for sure, man. And plus I'm obsessed with the concept. So we kind of come from that. We talk about it all the time. Kind of come from that. The Star Wars Galaxies era, and how ahead of a time it was, right? How ahead of its time it was, and this is just, that ideal, taking that ideal and just ranking it up to, 30. So it's going to be pretty awesome.
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. Like, all the concepts we've spoke about so far, and then just, the things we don't know that are coming.
Well, that's the thing. We got a pretty good imagination, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't think of that. All right, that's cool. That's cool. So, but yeah, I'm excited for the new stuff, man. So,
Well, one of the things, now that we're it's so funny, we've gotten warmed up here and we're about a good hour or so, hour and 50 minutes into it. I do want us to speak a little bit on the Lyria kind of pivoting back to, a little bit more of a narrow conversation on just kind of how we handle a Lyria mining operation. Because I do think that there's some things that we do that are a little different, or, if people are beginning to kind of, specifically plan for those things, I think that we could probably at least get them on, thinking about some of the things that they need to think about. And so, what I thought
Absolutely.
we would do is just kind of riff on that a touch. So,
Okay.
We have, our organization, of course, has necessities and things. A lot of our industry group, it buys armor for Marines. I mean, and that type of thing. Now we've had some good donations lately as well, but certainly for quite a long time, the industrial group was putting a lot of money into the organization and purchased Gladius fleets and all sorts of things. I couldn't even begin to list them all. So in that we kind of the mechanics being what they are on Lyria. Lyria has a situation that's kind of... Now, I had heard recently that's like the meta has also apparently gone over... Now, I haven't validated this, but somebody told me in the stream the other day that the 2+ rock meta is also in the Microtech systems now. I don't. But Microtech is so tedious to mine with its weather. I wouldn't necessarily go over that way, anyways. Right? I don't know if the minute you get blown around on Clio or Uterp or or Calliope or whatever, it is not fun. I mean, it's a hassle. So, but we have our Lyria mining operation. That's been a pretty standard thing, and I think we have we have scouting. And that includes, of course, scanning, and that's some Overwatch in that as well. Like, when you have scouts, do they, what's the preference? Are those going to be fighters that can then pivot back? The other thing is you have people that, as you're scouting, they may have to sit on a rock for a while because there's no marking mechanics at all, which is really something I think that you and I would love to see in the future.
That most definitely. I mean, that has been, we've been using, our scouts as markers. It's that they go out, they find something. We calculate. Is it worth mining? And they kind of sit there and wait. And when we get to them, and at some point, like you said, it'd be great when we can start marking. Because when people go out and scout, they'll go, "Oh, this is great." They set a marker. And and then we can make our way to it, and they can get on scouting, because as it is right now, we usually on our mining ops, we usually have about 6 scouts rolling, and they're out scouring the surface of Lyria, looking for those rocks,
right? Because that's goal 1, right? You don't have a mining operation if you have nothing to mine. So that's your beginning point. Right. You've got to get scout. So that's the first thing that you need to prioritize scouting. And to a point where, honestly, if you have the choice between, putting, 6 guys out there that, are scouting and then, or 2 guys in scout and 4 guys kind of in a mole, you're not really, that's not the best use of your time. You really want to prioritize scouting. Scouting is locating at least 2 or 3, kind of clusters or doublers or whatever, specifically on Lyria, 2+ rocks or more, but locating at least, 70 to 80 SCU per cluster and getting at least 3 of those on deck, is really what you primarily want to shoot for. Now, we have prospector breaking teams as well. So, we do have people that do scouting, and sometimes they're in prospectors and sometimes they're in fighters. And it just depends on whether or not we have kind of a mixed, group where some of our combat folks are coming along. Because we're very blessed. We have very competent combat folks, and they do sometimes fly with us and, and provide cover and escorts and that type of thing. So, and of course the scanning mechanics have changed, right? So it's one of those things where instead of cruising along ultra fast, now when you go to scan, you have to kind of use more of a ping,
Mm-hmm.
and the V scan and scan angles in order to be able to find
it,
things as efficiently.
it's been more, yeah, it's been more of definitely more of an active approach. And, we've kind of had to, work with, work with a lot of people and, have them get an understanding of, how you search these days, because that has changed, considerable before. Like we were saying at the beginning of the podcast that, you know, back in the day, you can bebop along and you'd have that 10,000 meter wingspan where, you catch things to your left and you catch things to your right, you catch things to the front, and you catch things, of course, you kind of do that, Italian racing approach and break off that rear view mirror, right? But
yeah, I mean, it was straight lining, at high speeds and pivoting on, when the whole bunch of diamond icons would kind of go off or whatever, two or more.
Yeah, because
you'd pivot on that and then go scan it and look at the go get the
'cause
scan results.
Because before, we went with 180 degrees, right? So we wanted, everything that was, in that 180 degree periphery. And, we'd pop that stuff up, and we could passively scan that, within that 10K range, So
5,000 meters off one wingtip, 5,000 meters off the other wingtip, and then as you drove in a swath, you just passively would detect the diamond icons.
Yeah, and now that's changed things up a little bit. Now, and it's okay, because I'm a mechanics person, man. I like layers of complexity to things, and
sure.
And that with the more proactive approach to scanning, where you have to get out and you actually have to ping these things out, because I've created my own little techniques and stuff, where I've kind of, we still have to actively ping, but I have kind of found those angles that kind of work the way it used to, where I'm pinging things 5K out and stuff, and kind of going on as business as usual. But having these your fighter guys, and having those guys learn how to ping those areas and find those rocks, so that's number one. And so depending on the size of your operation, because usually on those big org nights that we have, we average that 15 to 20 people, and having those 4 or 5, 6 scouts out makes a big difference, where we're trying to definitely cover as much ground. Before we used to kind of split everybody up and have them heading in different directions and stuff, and now we've kind of tried to more stay centrally located in a certain area where we can kind of
a more gridded approach. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Because like we said, it seems like these little clusters of kind of are kind of more few and far between. I mean, you could have those days where things are getting just popping up, but when you're doing it when you're doing a big orc night, like the other week, where we were finding great singles, right? We were finding
lots of prospector rocks, but not
lots of prospector rocks, but nothing to fill a mold with, right? And so we've kind of had to kind of come with more of a sledgehammer approach, and try to really work that area to stay efficient, right? So you guys out there know that you find these clusters, and you may get 2 good rocks, but for the most part, it's all the 2%ers, and you may find one that's like an 8,000 mass, but it's only like 7% or something like that. So we were trying to to bring it up the efficiency levels. We were trying to find those those groupings, within at least 30K of each other, to where we send the crews out. They'd crack the area, they'd clean it up, and have it ready for the mole, so the mole could daisy chain its way across those areas to keep up the efficiency. Because if you're finding clusters that that only have about 40 here and 40 there, so I mean that's how we were keeping that rolling. Now, don't get me wrong, you also find those great rocks that where you find a pair that, the one rock, would have, 60 in it or something, so, and then the other rock, would have another 30. So, those do pop up, and, we're looking for them, and honestly believe that it's, things are going to,
smooth back out.
Things are going to get back to, say, normal, right? But back to where we're finding more rocks, and I believe a lot of this is going to come in this next little patch, for sure. But to kind of go on what you're saying is that you start with your scouting,
right?
And we've come up with our particular way of doing things we send out prospectors in pairs. So each prospector has its wingman.
Right.
And they go out and, break these rocks together.
And we try and keep those guys relatively close to each other. I mean, if they're out prospecting and looking for rocks to mine, they're still within, we don't like to get too much farther than, say, maybe 30K away from each other.
Oh, that's it. We're trying to keep them
tight.
Keep them close together. And so we can, because once you start spreading out, then, you're all over the moon there. I mean,
we've just found it's not quite as efficient. It's more efficient if your cracking team, can get there and get started. And one of the things on Lyria that happens is, different than here in Halo, is the fact that you can have these 7,000-8,000 pound rocks, so, they're definitely a thing.
And that's most definitely. I mean, that's kind of our bread and butter, right? That's why we have pairs, to break those big rocks.
That's exactly right. And of course, there's a little bit different kit. If and I don't necessarily know that we've done a super good job at this part yet, but I mean, I do think that prospectors should have more stampedes on board. If you're working with another prospector and they both have lancets, really, there's nothing when it comes to Quantanium mining. There's no rock that's too outside of your range that you can't crack, and you don't need necessarily like two lasers on one piece will bring the instability down to a very manageable level. So having having stampedes kind of kitted where you can kind of run through the optimal window a little quicker is definitely one way to improve how kind of your break time. And the other thing that I think we kind of alluded to it a little bit, but one of the layers that recently changed probably within the last 30 to 45 days for us is the fact that now the prospectors, if you have, and this is quite common, anybody who spends any time mining in Star Citizen knows, you can break a rock and there's a big giant piece of inert, could be a huge mass piece just sitting right on top of what it is, underneath is the stuff you need to get at. Now we're having those prospectors actually scoop that stuff up, that inert or those bad rocks, move those out of the way. So it's just not just cracking, it's the cleaning part. And then once they may get to a point where they're full up, well, then they can just tap their extraction laser on. They can't get it full up, but if they get, once they start getting, 25 SCU or so, they just need to tap and get just one unit of Quantanium on board.
Well, that's the thing is that, it just takes one little tap, just barely a little bit. And that's kind of the things that, we worked on before, is that before your cargo hold gets too full, just go ahead and find that crappy piece that has 5% or 7%, and just tap that thing, and go ahead and clean that up. Make sure that's the first thing you extract, right? You
will need
clear
that.
you clear all the crappy pieces away.
Yep.
You clear out the 5s and the 7s and the 2s and things like that. You just suck up that whole rock, because we don't need that thing. And then what you're left with was the large percentage rocks, and that's the big thing, especially when you're dealing with things with gravity, right? Because all that stuff, when we break up the rocks, this is the part. I guess this is the genius part, right? I mean, yeah, we've always been running 2 prospectors to go crack big rocks,
right.
But the genius part about it is that now we clear all that stuff away, to where only we just basically separate the wheat from the chaff.
Exactly.
Where all we have is just the good stuff. That way, when the mole comes in, he doesn't have to think about it. He just sucks up everything that's there. He's on to the next.
Right.
And that's the part of us working our efficiencies, right? That's why we're trying to stay, within this fair range, that where when we find these rocks, say we only got 60 SCU off say a pair that was there, and somebody else is sitting on a cluster, but there's only 2 good rocks, and it's 30 SCU worth, the 2 good rocks, we only got 30 out of. Fine, they can crack those rocks, they can clean it up. The prospector comes in still within the time limit that it that takes before it goes unstable. They come in, they suck up that other 30, and bam, we're full and we're out the door.
Right.
And we're on to the next ones, and that's really what we've been working on. And you're speaking about the the uses of the stampedes and things like that to make sure that we're going more quickly, because time is a factor, right? Especially when because you don't want people just sitting around doing nothing. We want these people, we want to,
well, we try and limit that, right? You try and limit that as much as you can. I mean, there are times when people have to sit and wait for, a prospector breaking team or somebody to come kind of relieve them, especially if they're a scout or whatever, but I mean, that really is one of the, it's a great big dance that goes on, right? You've got your scouting ships that go out, they finally locate something. You send a 2-man breaking team. Your whole goal is to have the 2-man breaking team once they're getting to a spot where they've got that thing kind of cracked and cleaned and all of the rocks are exposed there. You hope not shortly. There's no lag time in between so your prospector team has relieved the scout. He's out looking for other things, or he may be flying Overwatch. There's another layer I'll pivot back to, but you want to really have the prospector team relieving the scout, and then the mole relieving the prospector team, and hopefully you kind of have all that stuff kind of, you're locating, you're cracking, you're extracting, you're hauling back to the refinery. You're locating, you're cracking, you're extracting. You really have, it's happening. If there's 3 or 4 nodes potentially that you might be managing, in different prospector cracking teams, and then sometimes it's been interesting. I mean, we've done this enough times where we know, it's like, wow, it started out slow, but then it got really hot. It started out hot, but then it got really slow. We had one night where we did, I think, 503 SCU in 3 hours. We had a night where we did 203 SCU in 3 hours.
You do. And that's the thing, right? We were humping it that night, and that's the beautiful thing, right? Is that one of these days we'll have some of this B-roll for us, but the beauty is, with our guys, our guys are so, our guys work so well together right now. It's great, and just to see that ballet of movement these days, with everybody, working in unison together, passing, they don't even have to, it's like they know exactly where everybody is. They don't have to think about it. They can pass over each other and catch different angles. And with the mole there, you got several prospectors and the mole, and they're all kind of working in unison. And
it's a
it's a beautiful stuff.
Oh, it's. I mean, and that's what I think we've kind of hinted on. That's what makes Star Citizen so special. Right, you have, you might have 15, 20 guys. You have some of them out in scouting ships, some of them out in breaking ships, some of them out in extracting ships. You have, the different layers, the skill sets that are required. Learning the scanning mechanics, learning how to do the cracking and cleaning, learning the proper, jettison and how all that stuff works. And tractor beams is something definitely, that's eventually going to be woven in there, like literally a ship that's just taking and making piles of the rocks to scoop. There's your 100%ers, here's your sub-hundreds, and here's your trash pile, like that kind of a thing is just going to be awesome. I mean, and maybe there's going to be some crossover between maybe the 315Ps will serve as scouts as well as, so, that's a ship that I think in particular is going to have, and of course, the mole, can be fitted really nicely for extraction. You can have the mole, it can have FLTRXLs on every head if you want, depending on how you want to do it. And it's probably not a bad idea. But that's one of the things. I'm glad that we were able to kind of cover this tonight, because these are the things that we work on all the time. I mean, it's so interesting that there are all these little pieces that all equal the kind of the great big thing, and sometimes, I mean, we do spend a lot of time training, what the current scanning mechanic is, or how to handle that, or, what do you do, or, those types of things are very much on the menu for things that we do day in and day out in order to make our industry group just better at what it does.
Well, that's how we, that's basically how we started the podcast. Is that, with all these new and, unique different things that, and there's still, and that's, one of the things that a lot of people, I think, get wrong. I'm gonna say wrong. I don't want it to be a negative, is that a lot of things that people don't think about it is that there's a lot of aspects, things that you probably haven't even thought of yet that will add to, just take, for instance, our little mining excursions here will add to that, what we do every day, whether it's, the cargo refactor with the tractor beams and stuff like that. I mean, what would it be like if, we had a big cargo ship and we broke up a bunch of rocks, and while the rocks are sitting there, are they still, what's going to happen? Are they still inert where we could pick them up, stick them in storage?
Right.
I mean, do they become active when the prospector scoops them up, or the mole? It's like one of those things. Is like, what if we take a bunch of rocks and put them somewhere else?
Well, and yeah, I mean, and of course, here are some other things that we just don't know, right? What if there's some like crazy, like unobtainium type thing, that like a resource bloom, in pyro in some place where there's like a massive gravity well. So you really have to kind of burn like energy like 75% faster. You burn hydrogen 75% faster, so you really have to have your refueling guys on point. You just can go down there for a little bit and get or go to the spot for a little bit and fight the gravity. But if you do, it's worth so much more money. I mean, like weaving all of these little layers into the gameplay, like refueling or the expanse, like having the kind of the mobile refinery and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's already what we've spoken about. It's already got quite a bit of thought and planning and things that go into this. I mean, we don't just run out and get 503 SU of Quantanium in 3 hours because we've put a lot of time and energy into it, quite honestly.
And we've trained, we've worked on our efficiencies. We've worked on, the way we do things. And to be honest, to kind of bring all this stuff back, back full circle, with everybody out there, it's one thing that, I want everybody to know is that, there's still ways of, to work this efficiency out, or to work, to have your particular game players, things like that. And there's a lot of things we haven't thought about yet. And, that's why we sit around, and that's why we have this podcast, is because we're going to sit around and we're going to talk about these things. We're going to work all the little problems, and because, hey, we have these little aha moments all the time, right? I mean, that's what we do. We just sit around and go, oh my God, what if we did this? It just seems so simple, right? And so, that's what this podcast is going to be about.
It is. It's going to be about, yeah, exactly. It's going to be about us, in many cases, just kind of chatting about, certainly some flavor of the month stuff, but always it's going to circle around industrial gameplay. I mean, I don't know that we'll be sitting around. I mean, certainly, there's a security aspect to industrial operations, and it's not to say that there won't be zero discussion of combat. Of course, that's not, we don't exist in the verse without that type of stuff. But I think, on the whole, probably more so around kind of the industrial overlay. You know what I mean? Just
industry touches a little bit of everything.
It
now,
does.
doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
I mean, if you had the big, you had the circle, right, and the sphere of influences, industry would be in the middle, and you'd have everything pointing to everything else, right? So, we kind of joke about it a little bit, but as it relates to org play, industry's the backbone of the org. It makes things happen. So
it is. It absolutely is. I mean, it's. And I think, fortunately, some gameplay has come along to allow more contributions. Like the FPS guys, they couldn't go shoot and loot before. So I think that, it will be interesting to see as time goes on if there's going to be more, where a lot of the different elements of the organization will be able to, contribute a little more, because kind of what they do naturally, obviously when you mine, you make a lot of money. I mean, especially when you get fairly good at it. I mean, you can make, without even trying too hard, $500,000 a day.
Easy.
Yeah.
And depending on how much time you want to put into it as well.
Right. But I mean, if you put your foot on the gas, you probably can make a couple million a day. Quite honestly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because we all, because, we work on, we're goal oriented, right? So, we feel like, we have to make so much a week.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah. So, without even trying, you guys could definitely get out there and make $2 million a week with, just goofing around. So, I mean, it's and having a lot of fun doing it, if I might say so.
Well, and yeah, I mean, Prospector's my favorite ship in the game. I probably have, I don't know, who knows how many hours in that thing. Of course, I think the Mole is one of the funnest ships in the game, because it's, you get a great crew on board, and there's, it's a lot of fun or whatever. And that being said, I think, I'm really looking forward to some of the future ships as well. I think, a lot of the salvage ships that are coming, we've hit on some of those tonight. Of course, the Orion, and they, it is interesting because the Prospector's a small miner, the Mole is a medium miner. There's also one other large miner that's supposed to be out there, because of course the Orion's the capital, right? So that's coming in the future as well. So there is more stuff, I think, that's that's going to kind of sneak its way in. And of course, one thing we haven't hit on at all tonight, which we won't spend a lot of time on, is how much in a much better place rock mining is, as well. Rock mining's it's the extraction bug's gone, and you can find hadnite much easier than you used to be able to. So, I mean, we've specifically kind of focused around the Quantanium. We've been in all sorts of different places, but I mean, more or less, this back end part of it was more theory crafting, specifically on kind of a Lyria, standard operating procedure type thing. And I hope that some of this stuff is, lent itself towards, we spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff.
That's true. And really, when we get together, we just, holy cow. I mean, how long have we been going already?
So an hour and 45 minutes. So
we have been talking, and we haven't even scratched the surface.
no,
so.
I mean it's exactly right. So that being said, I really have felt like the conversation's been fantastic tonight, and I definitely hit on a lot of the things that that I wanted to talk about. So I'm happy that we were able to kind of at least speak to that, and and really kind of the broader implications, like we talked about some of the larger gameplay functionality and some of that stuff that's coming around the corners. Super exciting. There's never,
it really is.
I myself, I can't think of a time. I've never been out prospecting where I'm like, I don't like this. I love doing it, man. I really do.
No, there's never been one time where I had the time to make a donut, the time to make a donuts moment kind of.
Exactly.
It's like every time I, strap in, man, I'm excited to say, but, so we've been going on for an hour and 45. One of the things, I guess, kind of, to bring all this back, to kind of tie it all together with a nice, neat bow, is that, a lot of these things that we've spoken about this evening is that, we're going to be covering in a lot of detail in the future. I mean, with a lot of, it's like, heck, rock mining alone, we could spend a whole podcast talking about, because
several. I mean, just hauling what ships can properly haul a rock, or there's so many layers to that. Or
the best, best practices for rock mining. Especially when you're dealing with big groups, because we've had to work out some challenges, with our people, getting out, and how do you split all the rocks up between 20 people, or it's like those are tricky.
And the real question is, some of the questions boil down to whether or not are you just out there having a little fun that night, or you're really trying to get some efficient work done. Two, I mean, there's other aspects to it as well, and the more people that you include in an operation, quite honestly, the more, it exponentially becomes, another, somebody who you've got to coordinate with, and, and hopefully they're on board with everything you're doing that night, so there's definitely some layers, some person. It's so funny because there's human resource issues. I mean, it's a weird thing in a video game, but there really are, man. There's HR issues. There's, I mean.
Yep, and we have a lot of these things that we can touch on. Other things too. We're just talking about all the different mining ships, and that is most definitely one of our big areas that we like to talk about all the time. That is definitely something that we could wax poetic on for sure.
Yep. And for any of you out here listening, I know that we're going to be, we're doing some recording tonight. Of course, there's going to be some posts, and then I'm going to be putting it up. But if you listen this far in, and if you have some suggestions or anything that you'd like us to chat about, make sure you do throw it in the chat. One of the things that I will tell you that will happen until it just can't, but it will happen, and I mean it, is if you contribute in any way, like we're going to shoot these kind of behind the scenes for a while, but eventually, hopefully, we'll get to live casting. It all depends on whether or not people find the stuff interesting and that type of thing. But I'm going to answer every comment. Every comment's going to get an answer. If you have questions, concerns, something you want to share, please do. I mean, we really are open books in this situation, and I do think that there are many times when good organic conversation can come from people asking questions or those types of things, or us addressing questions in future content that were asked in previous content. So,
and that's the thing, right? That's the beauty part. Is with all these different good heads on people's shoulders out there, it's like, because you don't know what you don't know, right?
That's exactly right.
You guys could had thought of something that we haven't even thought of yet, and that would be some great conversation. I tell you, it's like getting together with a bunch of people and talking shop, because we could talk about it, that's for sure.
Well, and I do hope that at some point, like we I just hope that people enjoy this stuff, and I hope that we have an opportunity to bring some guests on and talk with them as well. And the sky's really the limit. I mean, I could not find a more enjoyable topic to discuss. Anything industrial based in Star Citizen, and I don't really honestly care what it is. It's interesting to me. Of course, the whole larger conversation about just what are best practices and those types of things is only one aspect to it. I mean, there's so much other stuff as well, to talk about. Not best practice stuff is something that we spend a lot of time on, but just having the conversations about what ifs, or just having the conversations about I hope that it goes this way, or just being able to kind of wax nostalgic, for instance, about Star Wars Galaxies, or these games that did it right in our past, that we felt like really did sink the hooks into us. Star Citizen, if you can say whatever you want about Star Citizen. I can tell you, as somebody who I've PC gamed my whole life, there's very few games that have put their hooks into me like Star Citizen. I mean, there's been a handful, but none of them have been nearly as ambitious as this title. I mean, I will also say, for the record, just having met so many wonderful, and I mean this in the most respectful sense, on the whole, older gaming people, and I don't necessarily mean that there's plenty of young guys that are great guys. I don't mean it in any way, shape, or form, but I definitely sense there's a little bit of an older community that also plays Star Citizen. I mean, I don't know too many games where I know 2 or 3 70-year-olds who play Star Citizen.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I mean, I don't know that there are other titles like that. And I mean that with the most respectful sense. I think Star Citizen's done this thing where it's taken like the Star Trek, that 60s Star Trek 18-year-old, and then put them, in the same game as the rest of us. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it really is a wonderful thing in that regard. And so I do hope that we can, find time to do these on a regular basis, and that we can, answer any questions anyone might have about it.
Well, I think we've had great conversation tonight, and I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to answering your guys' questions. This has been awesome, and I think we got a lot more to say. So, you got any closing notes?
I don't. I want to thank everybody. If you've listened up to this point,
yes, thank you for listening up to this point.
We're going to say a magic word here, like not right at the very end. How about pineapple, right? If you say pineapple
right.
in the if you say pineapple in the
chat.
In the chat, right, we'll know that we'll know where your loyalties lie. So with that being said, I'll kind of just say thank you all for your time. We certainly are going to be coming at this again here sometime soon, and please do like and sub, at some point, if this does well enough, we'll definitely stand it up on its own thing and make it a thing.
B, it was an awesome conversation, man. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks out there, and please tune in again for the next Rock Runners Report.